Hi, my name is Lisa Elvin Staltari. I'm a genealogist and a passionate traveler. In order to understand genealogy and do the research, it really is all about location, location, location. Understanding the places your ancestors would have lived in and perhaps some of the activities that they were involved in is critical to understanding and piecing together their lives. So many times when I have been researching in an area where I've never been, I feel just like that traveler lost without a map. The true map is the history and the geography of the towns your ancestors lived in. Understanding county lines, for example, and now they've changed over the years, will enlighten you in terms of where to go to research, what to look for. Knowing the history of a place and who may have influenced your ancestors' decisions. All of these are what make genealogy, for me, endlessly fascinating. It really is a rabbit hole, and one I come out of each and every time going, wow, I didn't know that. I do have a website, Have Roots Will Travel, this YouTube channel, of course, and I'm on Facebook and Twitter. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click on the notifications alert, and like this video. All of this helps me. You can post a suggestion or email me at lisa@haverootswilltravel.com with any questions or suggestions you may have. In this series, I'll be focusing on the highways and byways of my native province of Quebec, Canada. Some of the roads I've traveled endlessly on, while others are completely new to me. I look forward to your input and suggestions for additional resources. Remember, we are historical travelers, so my suggestions for museums, lodging, restaurants, all have their basis in either history or understanding the culture of the place we are visiting. Let's get started, shall we? The very first travel we'll be doing is on a very famous road called Le Chemin du Roi, or the King's Road. The idea for doing this particular highway came to me as I've been working on my concurrent series, Les Filles du Roi. Many of the women who settled New France moved into villages along this very same highway. I kept seeing the names of these towns, and I said, I've got to find this out. I've got to find out more about where my ancestors lived. Let's begin by exploring Le Chemin du Roi. Let's first talk about the road itself as it exists today. It's part of the Quebec highway system and is now known as Route 138. Now, Route 138 is a very, very, very long road that starts off from a very remote town called Blanc-Sablon and winds its way throughout Quebec, ending at Elgin, which is directly at the New York-American border. It's a whopping 880 miles or 1,420 kilometers. It passes through the regions of Le Montérégie, Lanaudière, Mauricie, Capitale-Nationale, and the Côte-Nord, regions of Quebec. Part of this highway is known as Le Chemin du Roi, or the King's Highway, which is one of the oldest highways in Canada. This is the portion we'll be traveling along as we explore the history of Quebec together. In 1706, the Councillor Supérieur, Grand Council of New France, decreed that a road be built to connect the houses along the north shore of the St. Lawrence River between Quebec City and Montreal. Work began in 1731 under the supervision of Grandvoyer Eustache Lanouillier de Boisclair and was completed in 1737. Upon completion, the Chemin du Roi was about 24 feet wide and over 170 miles long and crossed 37 seigneuries. Those of you who have been, following me along on Les Filles du Roi series know how many seigneuries there are. So 37, that's whopping, that's really big. The Chemin du Roi was the longest road in existence at the time, north of Mexico. In 1910, the portion of the Chemin du Roi on Montreal Island was renamed by the district and county of Montreal as Gouin Boulevard and is no longer considered part of the historic route and does not feature any of the famous Chemin du Roi route markers that the tourist route now is signed with. But if you go to Montreal and you're on Gouin, know that you are on that particular part of what existed, the Chemin du Roi. The Chemin is the first roadway built between Quebec City and Montreal that could accommodate wheeled vehicles, i.e., we're not talking cars here. We're talking, horses and carriages. It runs from Old Quebec and winds through Old Cap Rouge, Saint-Augustin-de-Mar, Portneuf, and several villages before coming to an end, as I've stated, in Montreal. I wanted to give you a very long overview of the road as it exists. You can see the blue line. You can see how long, and this is the route we're going to be taking. Now, how long does this road actually take? 2 hours, about 2.5 hours. So it will seem much longer when we're looking at all of the towns and all the. So pretend that you're actually stopping at every town for a day, if you will. So that's kind of the approach I'm taking. And there's so many things to see. You would, in some towns, be there at least 2 days. Now, you will see along the way, Chemin du Roi, the Vieux Chemin, you'll see signs along the way, and you'll know you're on the route. A lot of people like to take the pictures along the route so they can accumulate them, if you will. But this is exactly the road we are going to be taking. First stop, Quebec City. Let's review a little bit about Quebec City. It's the capital city of the province of Quebec. 500,000 people live directly in Quebec City. Quebec was originally named by the Algonquins, who named the area Quebec, K-E-B-E-C, which in their native language meant where the river narrows. Quebec City lies where the St. Lawrence River narrows. Samuel de Champlain founded a French gentleman here in 1608 and called it Ville de Quebec, or Quebec City. The city walls which surround it still date back to this time period, making Quebec City the only city with remaining city halls north of Mexico in North America. Now, obviously, in Quebec City, we are going to be focusing our attention on that part of Quebec that is the old Quebec, lower town, upper town. You'll see that in your genealogy, Bas-Ville, Hauteville. That is part of how they identify themselves. The lower Belleville is where you will find places like Chateau Frontenac, the Governor's Park, the Plains of Abraham. A lot of these we're going to be reviewing individually. The National Assembly is part of the upper town regions. So let's get started and look at some of the things that make Quebec City so incredible. Well, one of the things that makes it so incredible, we start with where it all began, the Basilique, Cathedral, Notre Dame de Quebec. Now, it wasn't always known this way. Let's review a little bit. This parish was actually founded in 1647. So it's in fact the oldest church in Canada. In a sense, this church and this site is the birthplace of religion in Canada, and certainly in New France. Before the cathedral was built, a chapel constructed by none other than Samuel de Champlain himself was on this same site. It was called Notre Dame de la Recouvrance. The first cathedral built upon this site in 1647 and was given the name Notre Dame de la Paix. The cathedral has had 2 fires destroy it. The first one, the notable Battle of the Siege of Quebec in 1759. It was rebuilt and worked upon for the next 70 years. In 1843, the outer facade of the building was changed so that it would resemble the Saint-Geneviève Church in Paris. In 1874, Pope Pius IX elevated it to the rank of minor basilica. In 1922, 3 days before Christmas, another fire destroyed the church. Although the culprits have never been found, it was rumored or thought that the Ku Klux Klan may have been responsible. At the time, this American organization was making inroads into Canada on an anti-Catholic focus. No cause has ever been definitively decided upon. As you can see, Notre Dame rose up again, stronger than ever before, and in a sense, even more deeply appreciated than ever before. There are said to be about 900 individuals buried under the basilica, including 4 governors of Quebec, of New France, the bishops of Quebec, and François de Laval, Quebec's first bishop. The holy grail for archaeologists and genealogists alike would be to discover the grave of Samuel de Champlain. So far, nothing. As you can imagine, with that much history, there are so many cemeteries in Quebec that I couldn't possibly decide, to feature them all. But please do your research and find out where your ancestors would be buried if you have ancestors in Quebec City. I've selected 4 to highlight on this slide. They're all, for this slide, Catholic. The first one is the Cimetière Notre Dame de Belmont, which dates back from the July of 1859 and is the first burial that was hosted in 1859. The other cemetery that was used at the time, the St. Louis, was closed several weeks after that, and this cemetery became the only one for the Notre Dame de Quebec parish. It's now part of the Saint Charles Compagnie of Cemeteries. Cimetière Saint-Charles and Cemetery opened in 1855 and has become the main cemetery for 6 parishes, the first inter-parish cemetery in Quebec. The website is listed in the notes section, and they also have a mobile app so you can take can you imagine, a virtual tour of the grounds. They also offer guided group tours if you happen to be visiting Quebec City. The Cimetière Saint-Sauveur dates from 1867 and is literally across the street from Saint-Charles. It is also part of the Saint-Charles Cemetery Company. One of the most interesting cemeteries, and one that I have run across quite a bit in early French-Canadian research, is the 4th one, pictures, which is the Cimetière de l'Hôpital Général de Québec. The Hôpital Général de Québec Cemetery is one of the oldest in the city, officially established in 1728. It is the burial ground of over 4,000 people. It's here that the greatest number of soldiers killed during the war leading to the conquest of New France, whether British, French, or Indian, are buried. The Hôpital Général de Québec still stands today. The largest number of burials are of all of the people who died in the hospital and could not be moved, thereby creating the illusion that this was a cemetery for the poor. There was a cemetery even older at the first hospital of New France, which was the Hôpital du Précieux Sang, started in 1639, if you can believe it, by the Augustine nuns, and a cemetery was attached to that hospital. In case you're wondering, the Hôtel Dieu is still operating today. Quebec is a remarkable, resilient place where history not only remains, but keeps moving forward. Now, if you actually are going to be traveling along this highway, you will see the Chemin du Roi, you'll see the Vieux Chemin. Different markers will definitely tell you that you're on the right road. And here's the map down here. We'll show you the blue line. Now, it's going to take us 11 episodes, quite a number of hours to go through all of this. But in actuality, or so Google tells me, it's 2 hours and 22 minutes. To do the actual route that we are doing. So it's not that long if you're just breezing through. So let's have a look at the emergence of the English in Quebec. There were English Quebecers during that time. They came after the conquest. If they came before, they'd have to be Catholic or pretend to be. The following churches and cemeteries are for Protestants, English Catholics, and Jewish. So let's have a look at them. You'll recall that before the English conquest of Quebec in 1759, all inhabitants had to be Roman Catholic. That was the lay of the land, the rule of law. Once the British took over, however, a lifting of these rules, as you can imagine, permitted much greater variety of religions and an openness to everything. The Cathedral for the Holy Trinity, which is an Anglican church, it would be the first Anglican church to be built outside of the British Isles. St. Patrick's Cemetery has existed since 1879. Prior to this, the St. Louis Cemetery for French Catholics permitted English Catholics to be buried in separate sections of that cemetery. They couldn't be together. No. They were separate but equal. This would prove very important during the epidemics of 1832 and 1847. The previous burial ground on the Grande Allée included a northern quarter section for victims of the cholera epidemic. later cholera epidemic outbreaks and victims of the typhus epidemic of 1847. And lastly, the Beth Israel Cemetery was established in 1840 and has approximately 300 graves. It has been designated as a historical site since 1992. Let's discover how Quebec City truly makes history come alive. One of the ways it does is a place called l'Îlot des Palais, and I found this on the main website of the Tourism Quebec. This is an interactive museum that focuses on Quebec history as a part of New France, but also the Native American influence as well. There are live reenactments and all sorts of exhibits. Currently, as I tape this in 2022, this is an exhibit on, there is an exhibit on beer making, which, as any good Quebecer will tell you, is something we make and drink as easily as we play hockey. The next one we're going to look at is the Maison des Jésuites. The St. Joseph Mission was the first permanent establishment founded in New France by the Jesuits. Inside there will be an examination of the influence on the native population, how they attempted to convert and Christianize this area. The lack of success is part of the history of New France. Le Centre d'Interprétation Historique de Sainte-Foy is actually in the presbytery of the Sainte-Foy Church, or Notre Dame de Foy Church. The history of this parish, which is among the oldest in the region, dates back to the 17th century. This museum is found and really establishes, found in Sainte Foy, obviously, but it is absolutely, I think when I was touring it and looking at it and researching it, I thought to myself, this is really where it all began. And in terms of Quebec City as a municipality and all of that, I would absolutely encourage you to visit this. I've posted all of the links in the show notes for this particular episode. This is a beautiful parliament, which of course resembles the National Parliament in Ottawa and was built between 1876 and 1883. Guided tours are available and are free, as is a visit to La Bibliothèque de l'Assemblée Nationale. I had a friend tell me just the other day that when Charles de Gaulle came to Quebec, and made that famous speech in Montreal, Vive le Québec libre, they actually had him tour le Chemin du Roi as part of his journey to understand how proud and how incredible the history of this place is, brick by brick. And the Parliament building in Quebec City is truly one of the most beautiful. Now, I found this in my research. Didn't know anything about it, but when I started reading about it, definitely going on the top of the list. The Quartier Roberval Archaeological Site. The site is of the very first French colony in America, and it's providing archaeology. It's a live site. It's definitely something that you can explore what they found. Not only obviously but the indigenous population, the fauna they found, the flora, all of that is part of this examination. And according to the website, there are tours in the month of August. Don't know why it's just the month of August, but note to self. So very, very interesting. And I think it's one of those things that's currently being focused on in terms of being built. I'm not sure that it's very old in terms of the public being admitted to it, and I think it's still a live site. I think they're still doing research, so I think it's to be developed. Another must-see in Quebec City is the Museum of the Plains of Abraham. The cost ranges from free for under 4 to about $15 for adults at the peak season, with different prices for students and seniors and at different times. And one really nice thing that I saw is that the museum entrance is free on Canada Day if you happen to be there. Provided a link as well. For those of you who are curious, the Battle of the Plains of Abraham also known as the Battle of Quebec, the Bataille des Plaines d'Abraham, or Première Bataille de Québec in French, was a pivotal battle in the 7 Years' War, referred to as the French and Indian War in the United States. The battle, which began on the 13th of September 1759, was fought between the British Army and Navy and the French Army on a plateau just outside the walls of Quebec City, on land that was originally owned by a farmer named Abraham Martin. One of the original settlers, and hence the name of the battle. The battle lasted for about 15 minutes. That's all it took. In the wake of that battle, the French evacuated the city, and their remaining military force in Canada and the rest of North America came under increasing pressure from British forces. Within 4 years, most of France's possessions in eastern North America would be ceded to Great Britain. And all this before the first shot was fired in the American Revolution in 1776. So you can see the Plains of Abraham, how beautiful it is. You can walk those grounds. That's probably number one on my list. I have, patriots that fought there. My 9 times or 11 times great-grandfather was Abraham Martin. As many people with Quebec heritage will find themselves, finding that Abraham was the father of many, many Quebecers. But very fascinating. Need to see this to understand the culture. Got to see it. Well, we can't go to Quebec City without talking about Chateau Frontenac. First of all, you can't help but see it. It's massive. And it's truly iconic to Quebec City. The construction began in 1892, and the hotel officially opened on December 18th, 1893, and was built by the Canadian Pacific Railroad Company. The hotel takes its name from the Louis de Buade, Comte de Frontenac, who was the governor of New France from 1672 to 1682, and then again from 1689 to 1698. So the guy was definitely popular. Frontenac is seen as someone who was a fierce fighter against the British and the Iroquois. The history of this hotel alone in the 20th century is enough to make it a must-see. It's here where Prime Minister Churchill, President Roosevelt, and Prime Minister Mackenzie King met to create war strategies in 1943 and 1944, both called the Quebec Conference. Alfred Hitchcock used this hotel in the 1953 movie I Confess. I mean, it's just, and so many celebrities stay here. It's just, the walls are filled with information on that. Well, it wouldn't be a capital city without some incredible monuments. Let's start with the man who started it all. The Champlain Monument on Dufferin Terrace pays tribute to the man who founded the city in 1608. It's one of the city's most spectacular landmarks, both because it's enormous, and it's really in a central location at a place where people gather. It's kind of a central place. So it's definitely, you've got a view to the St. Lawrence. It's definitely, prime location, as it should be for Monsieur Champlain. There is a beautiful monument by sculptor Alfred La Liberté, who dedicated this sculpture in 1918 to celebrate the 300th anniversary of the arrival of Louis Hébert and his family, who are considered the first family of Quebec. Featured on the monument is Louis's wife, Marie Rollet, and his children, and their children can be found on the statue. And so, for those of you who follow Quebec history, Louis Hébert also happens to be, again, I'm not atypical, but Louis Hébert happens to be one of my great-grandparents as well. So it is, obviously he's like our Mayflower. This is the guy. He's the father. And if it weren't for him, almost nothing would have existed, because he started a great many things. And the last one, again, there's so many monuments, but I chose this one just because of the American and British influence. We have a monument to Roosevelt and Churchill because they were here, and I want to see this. So again, we talked about it in the previous slide with Chateau Frontenac. Well, there's a monument dedicated to the meeting, and I think it's located actually on the road leading to the Citadel, which of course is a primary military institution in Quebec. Well, let's go shopping at least. The slide on your left is of the Old Port in Place Royale. It has, of course, it features narrow streets and architecture of the Old Port. It's really amazing to see. In this amazing setting, it's on St. Paul Street. You'll find antique stores and artisanal boutiques and art galleries. It really will make you feel that you're standing in history. It's just amazing. Now, the one on your right is very picturesque. It's the one that, you know, basically every website will feature it. It's Petit Champlain District, which is North America's oldest shopping district. And it is amazing in terms of the cobblestone streets, and it's exactly what you would expect. If you went to Quebec City and wanted to go to the oldest place in North America, this is it. You've got some amazing historic homes in here. It's like in the winter, it's got twinkly lights, and in the summer, it's got lots of, you know, outdoor terraces and bistros. It really is a place to see and be seen. So definitely on my list. Well, obviously in Quebec City, you've got the dining capital of Quebec and to some extent Canada. Obviously, Montreal and Toronto would have something to say about that, but you can get any kind of cuisine that you want and incredible food. There, some of the finest chefs in the world are here. To select 3 restaurants, you know, was really a task, but I've selected 3 restaurants that I believe are, you know, kind of embody the history and also the culture. The first one I want to try is Restaurant aux Anciens Canadiens, which literally means to our old Canadians, our historic Canadians. And it is found inside a historic house that it is the oldest surviving house in Quebec, 1675. Can you imagine? Let that sink in. So when you're dining in this restaurant, you're actually sitting inside of history, incredible history. Now, the Bistro 1640 is found inside the Auberge Place d'Armes, which is a hotel. And that structure dates back to 1640, even older, but it is more of a commercial structure. And it was actually built for one of the New Francis pioneers, Guillaume Couillard. Now, remember we talked about the Hébert family, and they were truly the pioneers? Well, the second family is the Couillards, and they married into the Hébert family. So those 2 families are truly among the royalty and the pioneers of Quebec. So the Auberge des Trésors Hotel occupies the upper 2 floors, and I read a little bit about this, and just as a side note, the upper 2 floors of the building are divided. One is divided in like a French side, and it was designed by Martin Boutet, and is adjacent to the Rue de Trésor. And the English side was built in 1853. It was designed by Edward Stavely, and the difference is the French style is visible in century-old stones and exposed beams, while the English style, which was inspired by George Richard Renfrew, contains more traditional brick and woodwork. I just love this idea as the daughter of a French-Canadian mom and an English-Canadian, you know, father, to have the 2 inside of one house. I gotta see this. Now, the next one is Le Bouche 49. Now, that is not a historic house, but it is obviously got very historic atmosphere, if you will. But I chose this one because of the kind of cuisine that it seemed to feature. La bouche means the mouth, and because it reminded me truly of a Quebec experience with the log beams and the home-style cooking when I looked at the website. And I grew up on shepherd's pie and anything and everything swimming in maple syrup. So I'm fairly certain that when I walk in, it'll be like a case of déjà vu, and I'll feel like I'm right back home. Apparently, it offers incredible shepherd's pie, which I have to have, pork stew, smoked maple salmon, and delicious sugar pie, which, as the Quebecers call it, la tarte au sucre. And so, for me, I got to try this one just for a taste of home. And so we will end episode 1 of our Le Chemin du Roi series here in Quebec City. It's been a long day. And so I will see you on episode number 2, where we will explore the next towns.